My name is Penny Matthews. Shall we introduce ourselves to start off with, please? As I say, I'll be chairing this morning, and my name is Councillor Penny Matthews. We have with us Councillor Pollard.
Yeah.
On my note, we also have with us Councillor Steve Gallagher.
Good morning.
Morning.
And if the officers would like to introduce themselves, please.
Good morning, Bethan Walker, licensing officer for the application.
Linda Anthony, licensing.
Thank you.
Aled Griffith, legal advisor to the subcommittee.
And we have with us this morning Mr. Parry. Good morning, Mr. Parry, sir.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning.
Would you like to introduce the gentleman that's with you this morning?
I now have the agenda, yes, thank you. Good morning. I've asked for apologies for any absences this morning.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. And any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest in this committee? No, thank you for that. So we go to the officer now, who will take us through the papers. And if we have any questions, that's when we'll be asking them. Okay, thank you.
Many thanks, Chair. Good morning. The application for a new premises licence was received by the authority on the 3rd of March 2021 for the premises known as Bamboo Beach Bar, 51 to 52 Wine Street, Swansea. The application was made by the company for Bamboo Ops Limited. The applicant has applied for a premises licence to allow the hours and activities listed at point 3.1 of your report. The application, including of an indicative menu, and describes the premises as a city centre bar offering food throughout its trading hours with a provision to supply late night refreshment. A copy of your application is attached to Appendix A of your report. The premises is situated in the centre of the Wine Street in the city centre, and you have a location plan of the premises attached to Appendix B of your report. The background of the premises currently has a premises licence which was granted by the licensing subcommittee on the 1st of September 2020. Due to the current COVID restrictions, the premises is not yet traded using this premises licence. The Council adopted a special policy on cumulative impact for the premises within the Wine Street area. Section 6 of the Licensing Authority statement can be found, and the link is provided in the pack. The special policy was last reviewed as part of the review of the policy undertaken in 2018. Updated evidence on the recorded levels of crime and disorder of the special policy, including Wine Street, was received from South Wales Police, and the evidence supported the retention of the existing policy without an amendment. This application has been considered in relation to paragraph 6.22 of the special policy. However, this application falls outside the exemptions specified. This means that where relevant representations are made, the licensing authority must determine the application in lines with paragraph 6.23 and 6.24 of the policy, which states that refusal would normally be the case unless the applicant is able to demonstrate that the application will not add to the existing cumulative impact. At point 5 of your report, you have the promotion of the licensing objectives, and each of these objectives is of equal importance, and the application must demonstrate how they are to be promoted. At Appendix C of your report are the conditions which are consistent with the operating schedule that will be attached to the premises licence if granted. At point 6 of your report, you have relevant representations. Representations were made by South Wales Police on the basis that there is a special policy in place for the location of the premises. The representation makes reference to the proposed increase in the customer capacity at the venue and the probable increase in cumulative impact on the area of Wine Street. The representation from Southwark Police is attached to Appendix D of your report. Representations have also been received from the licensing authority acting as a responsible authority. This is again on the basis that there is a special policy in place for the location, and that representation is attached to Appendix E of your report. In response to the representations received, additional information, including an evidence statement from the applicant, has been submitted by the applicant's solicitor, and this information has been previously circulated to all parties. At point 7 of your report is the policy consideration. In considering this application, members should have regard to the current statement of licensing policy. At point 8, you have the guidance issued by the Home Secretary, and members should also have regard to the relevant parts of the statutory guidance. At point 9, you have the determination of the application. The decision must be based on the individual merits of the application and the representations received. Paragraph 6.24 of the special policy applies, which states, where relevant representations are made, the licensing subcommittee of the authority will hear those representations and determine the applications. For applications that fall within the requirements of the special policy, refusal will normally be the case unless the applicant can demonstrate in their operating schedule that the application will not add to the existing cumulative impact on one or more of the licensing objectives, and that the authority would therefore be justified in departing from the special policy in light of the individual circumstances of the case. The licensing authority expects applicants for premises within the cumulative impact area to be exceptional. The authority does not consider that the premises that are well managed and fully compliant with all its licensing conditions and relevant legislation to be exceptional. This is expected of all licensed premises. In arriving at your decision, members should have regard to the relevant provision of the policy and the guidance. Reasons must be provided for any departure from the policy or guidance. In reaching the decision, the committee must have regard to the representation and take the steps available at point 9.3 of your report, and the licensing subcommittee's instructions are requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Walker. Do either of the committee members have any questions? Ms Walker, please. No? Okay, thank you. So we go now to the police who've raised an objection, and then we'll go to licensing colleagues who have also raised an objection. So if we could go to the police first, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. South Wales Police representations have been submitted on behalf of the Chief Constable of Police to outline how the granting of the application before us today will undermine the promotion of the key licensing objectives. This premises, known as Bamboo, is situated on Wine Street in Swansea in the centre of the evening and nighttime economy. South Wales Police have provided evidence since 2013 to support Swansea Council with adopting a cumulative impact policy due to the saturation levels of licensed premises within the city centre. The policy is broken down with 3 separate areas, one of which being Wine Street and the surrounding areas. Under paragraph 6.2 of the special policy, the authority was satisfied that it was appropriate and necessary to adopt the aforementioned policy due to the number of premises licensed to supply alcohol for consumption on and off the premises in the streets and the surrounding area, along with the incidents of crime, disorder and public nuisance attributable to customers of those premises. Paragraph 6.22 states the effect of the special policy is that in respect of premises located in the area, there is a presumption against granting any application for a premises licence, club premises certificate, or a variation that is likely to add to the existing cumulative impact unless the applicant can clearly demonstrate otherwise. This presumption is only relevant to applications which trigger a relevant representation from a responsible authority or other person referring to one or more of the licensed objectives which gave rise to the special policy being introduced. It is acknowledged that there is already a premises licence in place for the premises which was granted in September 2020, and should this application be successful, that the licence will be surrendered. Prior to the application for the current premises licence being submitted, a joint visit was made to the premises in 2020. Discussions took place in relation to the refurbishment of that premises. It was agreed that the ground floor of the premises became an extension of the external queue as the customer demographic. The preferred area within the premises was the external terrace, which was the most popular with customers. This resulted in issues with the use of toilet facilities on the first floor. Customers were witnessed to leave the premises to urinate in a nearby alleyway before re-entering the premises. As a result, South Wales Police were supportive of the internal alterations to the premises that were discussed, that included additional toilet facilities on the ground floor. Discussions took place relating to the changes, and requests were made by the applicant to submit via a minor variation, which confirmed that there would be no increase to the capacity of the premises. The decision was taken by the local authority that due to the number of changes to the premises, that a minor variation was not permissible, and therefore a new premises application or variation of the premises licence would be required. In confirming this requirement, a commitment was again given to no capacity increase at the premises. As a direct result of the application process and committee hearing in September 2020, on receipt of this application, it was requested of myself to contact the applicant's solicitor with a formal request seeking clarification of the capacity figures. I refer to my representation where the correspondence with the solicitor includes the response in the final paragraphs of pages 3 and 4 of the representations, which confirms an increase of 150 persons, a percentage increase of 24%. There's no reference to this increased capacity in this application. If the committee is mindful to grant this application with the proposed 24% increase in capacity, with the premises operating till 3 AM, 7 days a week, this application would cause the authority to depart from the special policy and have a negative impact on crime, disorder, public safety and public nuisance in the area. South Wales Police accept that the fire safety capacity is covered under its own primary legislation, and fire safety officers and other authorities calculate this capacity as a result of the number of persons who can safely be accommodated in the premises based on a variety of factors, including the ability for persons to leave the premises in an emergency. This calculation does not consider the impact and resource implications for any other authorities who have their own legislations, policies and procedures to follow. The representation submitted draws the attention to the 182 statutory guidance, namely paragraph 1.4, which states that the promotion of the statutory objectives is paramount consideration at all times. Section 17 of the Crime Disorder Act 1998 requires both police and local authorities in the exercising of their function to have due regard to the likely effect on crime disorder in its area and to do all they can reasonably do to prevent crime disorder. In addition, the Act created a statutory partnership between local authorities, the police, and other key partners to work together in reducing crime disorder in all aspects of their work. In order to assist and provide an overview to members of any committee, crime statistics are submitted as part of the police representations relating to the area of the premises and the premises itself. The police figures relating to bamboo that have been submitted confirm that the number of incidents that have taken place at the venue are extremely low. And as a result, there has been no intention to undertake any enforcement action relating to these crime statistics. However, it is important to recognise that despite all the best efforts of the operators, incidents unfortunately do take place. And based on our forced crime recording standards, these crimes have to be investigated and have the resource implications based on our victim crime satisfaction and victim focus. In order to clarify the figures presented for the committee, all crimes on our system are recorded with a location, and that includes individual premises. In total, between 2018 and 2019, 45 occurrences were linked to the venue known as Bamboo. Having reviewed the figures prior to the submission of the police representations, there were details within the crimes which may have been open to interpretation in terms of the venue or location or the nature incident recorded, and therefore, for clarity, they were discounted from the figures in the current representations. Incidents where there were more than one victim linked to one incident were also discounted, despite those individuals having a crime recorded against them individually. Therefore, a conservative decision was taken to provide the details of the crime that were directly attributable to Bamboo, which relates to the 13 crimes that are mentioned in the representation. The police data highlights that despite substantial police commitment to the evening and nighttime economy, figures show that all levels of crime, including violent crime, are significant. And the red highlighted areas that you can see within the statistics, within the police representations, show that peak times between midnight and 4 AM on a Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Any increase to the cumulative impact will have the potential to increase these figures further. In order to police the evening and nighttime economy, South Wales Police utilise a specific policing operation on Wine Street, Little Wine Street, and surrounding streets called Swansea After Dark, which is implemented every Friday, Saturday, and identified busy event days. The operation consists of officers who were deployed between 6 PM and 6 AM, along with additional officers from across the division, which are taken away from their communities and their primary roles, and in financial terms cost in excess of £500,000 to resource. This has a substantial impact on the policing of communities in Swansea and Neath Talbot area. Superintendent Steve Jones, who is the head of operations for the division, has respectfully submitted the following for your information and consideration. I have been appraised of the detail contained within the application and endorse the police representations that have been submitted by PS Hancock, objecting to the application in its current form. I'm aware that this premises already operates one of the latest premises licensed in the city centre until 3 AM, 7 days a week, and the proposals are to increase the premises capacity by 150 people, an overall increase of 24%, which will be distributed over 3 floors. I have a vast amount of policing experience within the Swansea local authority area. I have an extensive knowledge and understanding of the evening and nighttime economy of the city centre, and particularly Wine Street. As a BCU, we have played a fundamental role developing and promoting safe evening and nighttime economy, and I have achieved this by working with our partners and assisting and supporting businesses wherever possible. Policing the evening and nighttime economy places extensive weekly demand on my resources on Wednesdays and Saturdays, as well as key event dates within the city centre. Our policing plans require resources to be diverted away from local communities across Swansea, Neath and Talbot to patrol the city centre nighttime economy in order to deter, detect and prevent criminality and disorder from taking place. A visible and engaging police presence also provide the reassurance to the visiting public they can enjoy what the city centre has to offer in a safe environment. This is often a challenge due to the intoxicated, violent and disorderly behaviour of a minority of persons. This has been widely commented on in the media by the judiciary after Crown Court hearings. I have responsibility to police in the whole of Swansea, Neath Talbot, managing high levels of community vulnerability. It also includes the nighttime economy in the city centre, SA1, Beachfront, Uplands, Mumbles, Neath and Talbot centres. These areas are already seeing significant increases in reported antisocial behaviour and disorderly conduct during evenings and weekends, with large numbers of young people and adults gathering to consume alcohol. Whilst I appreciate that once restrictions are lifted, we will see a return to some sort of normality, there is a strong assumption that young persons will continue to gather. This will undoubtedly mean additional pressures to policing, coupled with the opening of licensed premises. The pressures of a further increase to the capacity limits at the proposed rate of 24% will mean additional persons leaving the premises onto Wine Street for my officers to manage their safe egress home. The implication for South Wales Police is that I have no option but to divert further resources away from policing other communities to support the nighttime economy. Unfortunately, it will be down to policing and key partner agencies to manage once persons have left the licensed premises establishments. I also have concerns if this is granted, will this encourage others to increase their capacities? Having considered the application, I'm in agreement with the police response to this application is reasonable and proportionate, and I urge the committee to support the representations. Swansea has previously been successful in achieving a purple flag renewal, which promotes a vibrant, diverse and safe evening and nighttime economy. This was achieved as a result of excellent work with partner agencies in conjunction with licensed premises. The Swansea Help Point was identified as a fundamental element of the evening and nighttime economy and was created to help reduce admissions to local accident emergency departments. The Help Point treats approximately 1,000 patients a year. Help Point is located within the Strand and consists of a qualified nurse, paramedics, St John Ambulance volunteers, street pastors, South Wales police officers and student volunteers. The Help Point, which operates between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m, is funded and managed through the Police and Crime Commissioner, South Wales Police Community Safety Department, the Local Health Board, and the West Wales Ambulance Service, and is in place to offer a safe and substantial medical facility to treat people visiting the evening and nighttime economy. The Help Point costs approximately £1,000 a night to operate and opens on a Wednesday, Saturday, and identified event days. Any additional days have the relevant financial and resource implications. The number of late night venues which encourage the increased numbers, the later drinking and intoxication, it results in additional pressures on the Help Point. The application contains a comprehensive operating schedule with a specific condition relating to the use of door staff from 9 p.m. on Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays that precede a bank holiday. As previously disclosed, the premises historically experienced issues in relation to customer numbers inside the premises, divided over the 3 floors, and in particular the location and number of toilets available for customer use. The current licence looked to address these issues with changes to the internal layout, changes which were fully supported by the police. However, the control in numbers and the number of door staff required to adequately manage numbers was an issue then, and this application does not outline how the increased capacities over 3 floors will be managed. And these are areas for consideration under section 2.12 to 2.14 and 14.3 of the 182 guidance relating to safe capacities. Therefore, any increase to capacity could cause significant crime and disorder and public safety concerns. In relation to the creation and imposition of a new menu, it is welcomed and supported by South Wales Police, and hopefully this will be used by customers. However, in my experience, this is a facility that is often offered by operators, but not utilised by customers. The proposed additional seating is again welcomed and supported. However, there are concerns regarding the non-fixed seating referred to in the plans. This seating area could be removed at any time and provide the opportunity for a more vertical drinking establishment. Based on the information provided in the representation, it is highly likely there will be an increase in cumulative impact, considering the substantial investment in the premises. The advertising of the premises via social media and other platforms, which has been ongoing, is clearly intended to attract additional customers to the area, with the applicant, by their own admission, looking to seek a wider range of customers. It is accepted that the operators are vastly experienced in relation to the evening and nighttime economy. It is recognised they hold a number of licensed premises within that area and within the city and with other locations such as Cardiff. They are thought of in high regard, and they are, as I said, vastly experienced, and those venues operate extremely well and are well controlled. However, has been identified they do experience the issues. South Wales Police submit that based on the 24% increase in cumulative impact from this application, should a similar increase be proposed to the other licensed premises in the area, this would lead to an additional 4,800 customers, which is based on a conservative estimate of customers of 20,000 customers in the licensed premises, which will adversely affect crime, disorder and public safety. In relation to the police representations, they have been considered on their merits, and as a responsible authority, South Wales Police feel their approach is fair and a proportionate response. South Wales Police data clearly shows the challenges that a nighttime economy presents in relation to crime and disorder and public safety. It is felt that this application in its current form does not adequately demonstrate how its operation will not add to the cumulative impact and the subsequent effect on the licence and objectives. As a result, I urge the Licensing Committee to support South Wales Police in our representations. Many thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Okay, so now we go to Ms. Loosemore, who I believe is representing the authority. Thank you, Mr. Loosemore.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. The representation is as shown in the report submitted on the 31st of March 2021. This application does not fall within the exemptions contained within the current policy, and the applicant does not demonstrate how the premises will not add to the cumulative impact already been experienced, in particular crime and disorder and public nuisance. We note through subsequent correspondence that changes to the plans have resulted in an increase to the fire safety capacity, which may affect cumulative impact. Clarification was sought in relation to any capacity increase from the applicant's solicitor prior to the writing this representation, as this was not indicated in the application itself. We note that the increase in capacity itself is at 150 persons overall. We note the applicant in the operating schedule intends to provide extensive seating to attract a wider range of customers that would be the case for a drink-led high-volume vertical drinking establishment. Also, the supply of food throughout the premises and trading hours within the intention to make the premises and operation a more family-friendly environment. However, this will not be applicable of a late-night bar and therefore does not address the crime and disorder and public nuisance concerns, add an additional 150 persons to an already saturated area. As the application, as previously stated, does not fall within the current exemptions contained within the current policy, we make this representation. We acknowledge the additional evidence supplied by the applicant yesterday and the experience of the operator. We also refute any suggestion of any lack of future support and partnership working with the licensing authority. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we come to Mr. Noon. Oh, muted. Apologies.
Ma'am, can I interrupt you there a second? Is it appropriate now for questions to be put to the any of the representations before we go to the applicant?
Yes, certainly. Are there any questions, please, from either of the councillors? Okay, Mr. Gallagher.
Sorry, is that myself, councillor?
Can you do something?
I'm sorry, Chair, was that myself you asked?
There's somebody speaking in the background, so to speak. I think it's clear now. Thank you, Steve. If you'd like to try again.
Yes, that's better. Thank you very much. It was a bit. A question to Sergeant Hancock, if I may. I take your figures as correct, is that there are actually 13 incidents of note in the premises. But am I correct in assuming or presuming that only 4 have been dealt with by either a fixed penalty, caution or restorative justice? Am I reading that correct?
Yes, councillor. Just for any sort of confusion, there's reference to NFA, which refers to no further action. Sorry if that's not clear, but yes, you are correct.
That was my query. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll go to Mr. Parry or Mr. Noon. I don't know who's going to speak.
Yes, ma'am, what I propose to do is I'll be relatively brief and just take you through some background to the application. And then I propose that you hear from Mr. Nunez, who will talk around the statement that he has filed, which I've kindly been informed has been circulated and I assume has been read by everyone concerned. But Mr. Nunez will take you through that. the special policy, first of all, as is made clear in the application, which is in your agenda pack, we're well aware that there's a special policy in this case, and we're well aware that it is necessary for us to include within the operating schedule the measures which will be taken to mitigate any impact. And what I invite you to do when you consider this application is in particular to look at the application from B, prevention of crime and disorder. It's a comprehensive provision made in that regard. C, public safety. D, the prevention of nuisance, and E, protection of children from harm. And what I would submit to you is that that is a comprehensive regime upon which you can rely to conclude that the applicant has demonstrated the steps that would be taken to mitigate any negative impact. One matter was raised by Police Sergeant Hancock by way of criticism or omission from the measures detailed as to the prevention of crime and disorder, and that is control of people within the premises, movement of persons from one floor to another, and so forth. You are aware of the fire safety capacities, and you are aware of the fire safety capacities floor by floor. It would be a simple matter for you to impose a condition that required the holder of the license to regulate the number of persons who are on any particular floor, so that at all times they comply with their requirements under the fire safety legislation. That would control numbers of people passing from floor to floor. It's there in any event, of course. As has been pointed out to you, there is primary legislation which addresses this. The fire safety legislation requires the operator to have in place a regime which will ensure compliance with the fire safety order. Part of that process involves the license holder as a responsible person arranging for a competent person to carry out a fire risk assessment. Included within the fire risk assessment is the occupant capacity floor by floor. This is primary legislation, it's there already. It affects every premises on Wine Street. And therefore there is already a responsibility, a legislative responsibility upon every operator, as it will fall on my client, to ensure that the numbers floor by floor are not exceeded, to ensure that the control of persons as between floor by floor are kept within the obligation imposed by this primary legislation. It's there already. On that point, on an historical note, you as a committee will be aware that the licence which was granted on the 1st of September 2020 imposed conditions, imposed maximum occupancy conditions, conditioning the maximum occupancy floor by floor to a total of 620 persons. You may also be aware that this is the only premises on Wine Street that is subject to such a condition. No other licence granted to any other operator on Wine Street contains such a condition. which is why when this application was made, I didn't ask for you to impose conditions as to numbers, because it's not required. You don't do so elsewhere. You've not done so for any other premises on Wine Street. The number capacity is dictated by, on this occasion, the fire safety of the premises, by primary legislation. Plans were lodged in support of this application, and in those plans, my client set out in detail its intention to have extensive fixed seating throughout the 3 trading floors of the premises. When Mr. Nunes gives his evidence, and will have seen that it's included within his statement, he will give you details as to the increased seating capacity. The increased seating capacity matches any increase in capacity for these premises. So what we're talking about is delivering a premises to Wine Street with a fire safety capacity. Yes, there will be an increase. They'll all be seated. The applicant is also going to provide a food offer throughout the premises on all 3 floors, throughout its hours of operation. That is highly significant in my submission when you come to consider this application, because what we have here is increased seating, people eating, a different demographic dynamic. And isn't that what we want for Wine Street? Isn't that what we're trying to deliver? There'll be a significant improvement in safety, comfort, quality of facilities, and in my submission, a stark movement away from what has been described as high volume vertical drinking establishments. And that was a criticism which many of us on this meeting today will recall from arising out of the application which was granted in September of last year. What we've sought to demonstrate and deliver as part of this application is a clear move away from the so-called high volume vertical drinking establishment. Instead, we are delivering safety, comfort, food, all of which we say will be attractive to the kind of people who we can expect to be more well behaved. The council will be aware of its own intended £3 million upgrade for the Wine Street area. The council's intention is to invest in the Wine Street area so that it creates a welcoming, safe and enjoyable family destination for visitors and businesses. It intends a more family-friendly environment. Mr. Nunes has been lobbying for this for several years, working for this for several years. This application is part of that process. So recognising the special policy and recognising the needs of the special policy, what we know is this: you will deal with this application on its merits. Special policy or no, you will consider the application on its merits. My case is that my client, through its operating schedule, has demonstrated and depicted the measures which will be taken to mitigate any such impact. And I will be inviting you to conclude that there will be no negative impact. This will be a significant improvement. And I will also be asking you to give consideration to certain background matters in relation to the special policy. There's been a lot happened since the special policy was first introduced and since it was last reviewed. My case today is that the applicant is right when he contends that it is highly unlikely that the grant of this application will add to any negative cumulative impact. You've already heard that the crime statistics in relation to my client's premises, as already existed, were, I think the words were used, were extremely low. I will be inviting you to conclude that if my client is allowed to deliver these improvements in comfort, safety, seating arrangements, food provision, that properly considered will lead to an even lower crime statistic, which is already extremely low. I think that's all I wanted to say by way of my initial opening. I'd like you to hear from Mr. Nunes. So what I propose to do is I'll mute myself and invite Mr. Nunes to, I do apologise, I lost the power of spoken English then, Mr. Nunes. I will invite Mr. Nunes to address you arising out of the letter that's been filed. Mr. Nunes, please.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to talk through my evidence statement. I was hoping we could do this by starting to cover a little bit about the background, my own background. Then we can possibly make some points with regards as to why I believe this application should be granted. The specific areas from the police licensing representation, I wouldn't agree and take some exception to. Now I'd like to finalize with a few final points that can hopefully bring some context into evidence statement tries to achieve. So I'm a 26-year-old hospitality experience. I call myself a veteran, I suppose. I'm the CEO of a creative hospitality group, a Swansea-based independent and award-winning hospitality business, and myself, who has picked up some accolades for the recognition of the work I've done for the sector and for my business. I've also dedicated a very significant proportion of my career in the UK, improving the hospitality industry in South Wales, in particular Swansea, and certainly Wine Street. Unfortunately, I audited for the first time with Swansea's local authority after what I believe to be many years of supporting hard work out of everything that could have been done to promote the full licensing objectives and the community it's supposed to serve, whilst at the same time working relentlessly on improving the fabric of and nighttime economy. And sadly, too easily is vilified because, in my honest opinion, it retails alcohol, in particular in Wine Street, tends to cater for an audience that often never sits or gets the chance to sit in the relevant stakeholders, which have been privileged to sit, that makes decisions regarding its future. The evening and nighttime economy, in my opinion, is yet to make the compelling and obvious case that we are indeed an essential subsector of hospitality that is not only the most taxed and regulated of industries, offering an economic value which, according to recent statistics, come to the tune of £104 billion to the exchequer every year, but also one that provides the safeguards for all of those that seek a food, drink, and entertainment experience. I feel that the evidence for that it's been probably come across most obvious throughout this last 13 months throughout COVID. I would have hoped that those that are stakeholders to the industry would have learned that disabling our sector from trade, all it has, it's placed a lot of the folks who look for that food and drink experience and entertainment onto our streets to gather illegally, onto our parks, onto our beaches, onto our city and town centers. And police, above all, have unfortunately had to deal with the brunt of what that has meant, where there's been, I believe, an unprecedented level of violence, abuse, antisocial behavior throughout this period. This statement also hopes to make stakeholders consider the value of the cumulative impact policy. The fact that I genuinely believe it's an outdated concept, that instead of benefiting, it actually hinders what it attempts to serve. It's only in place because folks that make the decision over its existence quite often don't really use or visit the evening and nighttime economy themselves, and sometimes often don't understand the current dynamic of the sector, its projected future, and perhaps don't realize that there's already a strong legal framework that is in place that can prevent rogue operators, which makes the need for a cumulative impact policy to exist in the first place. But in this case, becomes irrelevant. Whilst I understand that it's not the SIP or the cumulative impact policy that is being questioned here, I think there is a lot of merit when considering this application that the SIP tries to achieve, and now in this case, it is of my honest opinion, that allowing to operate bamboo only to the same standard as everywhere else on the same street, I repeat, only to the same standard as everybody else, will not add a negative impact to the city's evening and nighttime economy, but indeed a positive one. This statement is also made with a great deal of disappointment because for the first time ever in my whole career, it has to hit back at an organization which I've worked quite closely and supported a great deal, in particular what I believe to be a nonsensical representation from the police licensing department. Unfortunately, I believe that both the police and licensing and council licensing departments seem to disregard some of the partnership work, and unfortunately, in particular in the police application. Throughout reading it, I felt that he really attempted to vilify ourselves as operators, often suggesting an element of disingenuity from our application, when, in my opinion, analyzing it, I believe they're disingenuous themselves. I take note of the words that John Hancock has shared today with regards to the recognition of ourselves as operators in the city. I'm glad to hear them. I do feel that these were not reflected at all in his representation. I believe that this ultimately, all it then achieves is somewhat of a breakdown in engagement, which will sadly, in my opinion, will filter towards hindering support to police and licensing authorities, most certainly not out of spite, but out of a major lack of trust, as we unfortunately realize, and I'm led to believe, that the so-called partnership work that is often used in a variety of communications about what the intentions are from local authorities and working with the private sector. It's really more of a soundbite in public manifestos, by and large, one-sided. Final point with regards to my background, I'd like to make this statement comes from a 26-year-old experienced operator in this sector, operating with and for Swansea community. Therefore, I hope that all involved can allow for this statement to have the significant expert weight I believe it deserves. If I move on to the reasons why I then believe this application should be granted, there is 5 key areas. First one being the improvement of the fact that these changes will attract a different crowd. I will hope that we can briefly look at some facts and figures and also add what the current challenges of COVID-19 have in terms of implications to this application. The improvement of space in particular will add increased seating. It will improve its facilities by and large, and also its comfort. And in particular, one key point with this application is when we look into the seating capacity and we break down with the pre-refurb works are represented in terms of venue capacity, in terms of seating capacity, and the percentage of set capacity. We'll look at numbers of 620 pre-refurbished works versus what's currently now 770, which is indeed 150. Additional numbers based on those improvements of the fire escapes that allow the business to now operate to this capacity. But it's absolutely vital to note that over the additional 150 spaces, 153 will now be able to be seated. The percentage seating of the capacity versus pre and post refurb has gone from just over 20% to just over 36%, near enough doubling the seated capacity. For those of you who are probably wise enough to remember the old days of the Licensing Act pre the 2003 will remember that there's always been a great deal of emphasis about vertical drinking. I believe this post-refurbishment works very much tackle that when every single person that will be allowed to, in addition to before, can now be seated and then some. To summarize, the seating is increased by 153. The capacity is only increased by 150. The capacity figure is limited only by the fire exit allowance based on the fire strategy by a third-party consultant, but subsequently agreed by building control, who will then advise the fire authority on inspection. Please note that our scheme with both fixed and movable seating remain in place at all times. We are able to accommodate more customers per square footage on every floor. However, these numbers are strictly limited by fire capacity. And further on, it expands a little bit further. When we look into the improvement of offer, there's an introduction of food throughout all trading hours. There is indeed an expansion of entertainment offer due to the current layout. And I hope that by now it's been very clear that the concept of high volume vertical drinking establishment, it's something that the new scheme very much looks forward to move away. But it's something that we wholeheartedly as a business now understand that it's the actual future of trading, and COVID has taught us that. How the changes will attract a different crowd through the trading pattern. Now we'll seek to operate 7 days a week. We'll seek to operate daytime. We need to maintain the 7-day week trading period in order to maintain the consistency of our food offering. The food offering itself will be offered from. We will seek to attract people work in the vicinity with its lunchtime offer. We look to deliver the food and drink takeaway offer, and we look to disable the need for the customers to leave to eat elsewhere. We've significantly revamped the ground floor. Our specific objective in that particular space is that we wish to aim for a 20 to 50-year-old female demographic. We believe that this is heavily indicated for, mostly because through our experience, we come to learn 20 to 50-year-olds look for a safe environment, often to go out with it. Everything done on the ground floor is very much geared towards that. This is possibly the number one demographic that businesses of my type would seek to get. We look to introduce a service style where customers prefer a table service in being hosted can now enjoy additional. With that, it will inadvertently attract an older and more discerning demographic. This is absolutely vital for our business, quite simply, because an older, more discerning demographic has better taste, and spends best. We were looking to place sport in sporting activities, predominantly focused on rugby. We have a significant plan. We're working with a partner company in London who has a vast experience working with the corporate sector. They believe this is going to be our #1 venue that will be able to attract a much more significant proportion of the corporate sector, mainly because due to its multifaceted offer. And yet again, due to doubling the seating capacity, I believe this hits out at the heart of anyone's thinking that Bamboo is nothing but a high volume vertical drinking establishment. It's important to note as well with facts and figures that, and again, I thank John Hancock's words with regards to acknowledging the extreme low level of incidents. I'm not too sure, other than 0 incidents, whether there's anything better than extreme. I believe that if we take into consideration that on average our business welcomes 3,600 people a week, that compounds a little over 180,000 people a year. This is a very large volume of guests to accommodate, with a total of 9 incidents, only 4 of which actually resulted in any form of action. We were hoping that after we requested under the Freedom of Information Act via our solicitor, that I was hoping to compare how did this stack up to every other competitor in our business, as well as other sectors of the business community, including the daytime economy. I have been learning a great deal about a great deal about other case studies all over the country, and we come to learn that quite often, in this case, perhaps quite rightly, the police feels compelled to highlight the number of incidents that occurred within our sector. But the reality is that quite often, if you just look into any other daytime business, that quite often those tend to attract a great deal more trouble than the nighttime economy often does. As a final point, what should be allowed this license application is that throughout COVID-19 impacted on pretty much everyone's future. Hospitality sector, as you all know, in particular, has been the one who suffered the most alongside the travel industry. Our sector has been decimated. This, in simple terms, would result in any future investment to be slow and inferior. Put simply, all the money to survive that had to be contracted as a form of debt will have to be paid back. This means over the next few years, any investment in the sector will be an issue. Lesser investment, quite simply, will lead to an inferior offer. There will be less refurbishment projects, and as a whole, I believe Swansea could then become less competitive and a less attractive city to invest in. I believe for that reason, the best operators should be supported. It is ultimately our investment that evolves the offer for all the stakeholders in the nighttime economy, and by consequence can bring about the many social, economic, and environmental benefits. I was hoping we could then move into the issues found with the police representation, and I hope to do this by extracting some key points highlighted by the police objection. That is a reference, to begin with, made to the issue of an increase in premises activity that will add to the cumulative impact. I suppose with probably a similar impact to the points made above with regards to the percentage of seating now introduced to the venue. I believe this point alone should suffice, considering the cumulative impact policy here shouldn't apply. If we look at the cumulative impact policy, which was introduced in 2013, we have actually lost over 10,000 whole of the city. What we're asking here doesn't even represent 1%. Well, a little over 1%. There's been 10,370. The list is in my statement. I suppose little point in going through it, but we should all be familiar with a lot of these venues, their capacities, and a great deal of them, they're being shut good and no longer have a premises license. There is an assertion that there was no consultation with the police. There was informal discussions between myself and John Hancock via telephone, right at the very beginning with the very first application, going back to last year. There is also the fact that we believe that the consultation is that 28-day period that happens after we submit our application. I didn't receive any particular contact throughout this period. So to make assertions that there was no consultation, it is, in my opinion, very unhelpful, and I think sets the tone that there's been a disingenuous approach from our end. If we then focus on the point of disingenuity, I can recall the first application, and immediately I was the one who volunteered the information with regards to the capacity of the venue being impacted by the improvements made with regards to fire safety. I was the one who volunteered this information. I did not have to volunteer this information. And it was only through the volunteering of this information that the police came to learn that improved safety measures would enable the building to entertain a high capacity safely from a health and safety point of view. It is, in my opinion, therefore, fundamentally wrong to suggest there was no consultation. The suggestion that, again, from the police, again, it brings, and I'm quoting, again, it brings into question whether other responsible authorities and residents have been disadvantaged, again, through the lack of transparency. This, in my opinion, the use of again twice seems purposeful in my eyes, an example of behavior from the police throughout this and previous representations to our license applications. It seems to me it's a real effort to make ourselves, myself as the operator, look quite negatively. I believe it's not warranted. In my honest opinion, it's small-minded. And in my honest opinion, most certainly doesn't provide a great reflection on someone who has the responsibility to be accurate, fair, balanced, as you'd expect from a police officer. Put simply, on that particular case, it's been some time, what I felt as insulted as such. If I ought to counter, and if you inform the police right at the beginning of your desire to put this application through explaining what you seek, ideally, we were hoping for a minor variation. You then ask for any concerns to be discussed if possible. And if the police felt to raise a presentation, I asked this to be done ASAP, as soon as possible, so that the hearing could hopefully be set at the earliest opportunity due to a significant impact on the operation. This goes back to the time where our sector was imminently supposed to open. Unfortunately, never did, but there was that pressure. And despite asking for any thoughts, any comments, any consultation, any concerns, there was no communication about representation at all throughout, before or after any of the two license applications for these premises, other than formally via our solicitor. The representation on both applications was done by the police on the very last day. So I believe the last one was actually at 10:30 in the evening over the last day. This for me was an attempt to delay this process as much as possible. Looking into the crime stats provided by police, this is with me now wearing my 26-year experience hat on. If we look at this data with a glass half empty, this leads me to believe that the crime seems to be shifting towards the later part of the evening, right at the time where we hope to prevent trouble through a cumulative impact policy. Therefore, the loss of venues has not impacted over a period when issues occur. This, in my opinion, only goes to show that the cumulative impact policy really isn't working. Wine Street is also failing to broaden its appeal. The reason may well be that the shift to later is because of its increased appeal to the younger generation, who ultimately goes out later and lost some of the older demographic who visits earlier. If we also look into the lack of information, the real evidence without what the actual footfall of the city looks like. I can tell that from our operations, our footfall over the years have increased slowly but exponentially over the last 10 years of trading on that street. If we look at the glass half full, though, if we analyze this data, the reality is that crime has been steadily declining in the last 4 years. All our Wine Street businesses have seen growth in footfall and also decline in incidents. This for me demonstrates a change in trend, and now therefore the case for investment would only help improving the offer, and with that, the breadth of attraction. Wine Street is, I'm led to believe, the #1 attraction as to why people visit Swansea city centre. The police then make a point with regards to Purple Flag, Swansea After Dark, and its cost to policing. Indeed, £500,000 does seem like a significant amount, but I suppose it's worth also contextualizing that if we look briefly from our own business point of view, and bearing in mind we are a small independent operation based in Swansea, and we reflect a small percentage of operators in the city centre trading in the evening and nighttime economy. But £500,000 is roughly around the 20% worth of direct taxation our business alone generates for the Exchequer. It's approximately about 7 weeks worth of payroll costs to our business.
Can I just stop you 1 second, please? We're getting interference, and our clerk would like to ask. What do you want to do?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Nunes. Sorry to trouble you. Sorry to interrupt. Would it be? We're having a bit of when you're speaking, it's breaking up a bit our end. Would it be at all possible for you to turn your video off and keep the volume, you know, the audio on? We think that may help.
Course.
Is that okay? Please? Sorry to
interrupt you. No, absolutely. Okay, please do let me know if it still continues, and we'll try and see if we can seek an alternative.
Thank you. Thanks
connection.
very much. Thank you.
There is a point made with regards to this £500,000. 20% of our taxation, 7 weeks worth of payroll cost, and this is only 3 out of the 6 sites we operate on Wine Street. We believe this is an incredible small number compared to the cost of managing people out socially spread all over the city. In the past, there has been a strong case, I believe, argued and both proven, that having crowds of people all in one place benefits the element of control of those crowds. This is, in my opinion, a small amount of money compared to the resources used for handling the illegal gatherings throughout COVID, and also led to far less injuries from officers on duty, due to predominantly our workforce being there, our bartenders, our waiters, our hosts, our managers, our security staff, all working to control and therefore part of the reason why I believe our sector is very much essential. Purple Flag, also mentioned, is something that I personally championed and worked alongside both the Business Improvement District and under the guidance of the Association of Town and City Management. The help point is something that I personally lobbied for, and with Daniel Jones at the time in 2003, since 2003, when at the time it was identified that the evening and time economy was creating a great deal of impact in the ambulance services in hospitals, A&Es at the time. This is something we believe was seen as a huge success, and therefore, referring to the costs of it being £1,000 a day, the reality is it saves a lot more in both ambulance and hospital resources. And indeed, despite the £1,000 being a significant amount of money, to put into context, it is an absolutely insignificant amount of money based on the amount of tax and all the other economic benefits, just as employment, that the existence of Wine Street has to Swansea and brings to the Exchequer. Again, please refer the value of the evening and time economy to the UK, currently standing at around 104 billion. Street passes are yet again another support group our business often supports and donates towards. And furthermore, we helped bring a bid-led initiative of Best Bar None, which is an accreditation which we have consecutively won ever since it's been introduced 3 years ago, that recognizes the efficiency and the quality of the businesses that operate in a nighttime economy. That is then the police making a point with regards to the figures highlighted, that despite the applicant's assertion that they are experienced operators and well respected, that the premises incidents of violence all require police investigation. I believe that this is yet again another attempt at smearing operator ability. I believe this is the type of comments that you often hear at a politician's debate, and I don't believe it should be welcome coming from a police officer. And I do believe that, yet again, I need to point out the incredibly low level of crimes that happen at the Bamboo address, consider the high volume of footfall that this venue experiences. Now I'm led to really consider the breaking down of the police incident figures that they've offered us. The reality is, during the first application, we were offered something like a small grid box worth of information, which gave us very little detail behind it. I believe it was a total of 5 words in a 12 grid box with some numbers. Despite I personally requesting this information never came in time for the first application. This is indeed a different application, but my solicitor, Bill Barry, managed to, via the Freedom of Information request, get the detail behind the numbers associated to this business. And there is a stark contrast. I depict that in the grid on my statement, but basically, in a nutshell, when during the first application we were given a total of 13 incidents and 14 incidents for 18 and 19 for the venue, when the police had to release the detail behind those, we note that those have gone down to 4 and 9. I'm not quite sure why that is. Is that a motive behind it, the reason to do this, or is it an issue with competence? Anyway, I'll let everyone consider that. Further context to the table provided by the South Wales Police can be found on the report. If anyone would like to expand or to ask any questions regarding those incidents, please do so. But just highlighting some key bullet points. The incidents in here report show that almost half of these, only 4 out of 9, seem to have happened during the late night period that the cumulative impact policy tends to protect. The incidents were of such light nature that 7 out of 9 led to no further action. 8 out of the 9 incidents were handled appropriately in our view. One incident was very unfortunate, as he showed our doorman did not operate to the standards we set, which are quite high, but he was indeed jumped by several friends of an ejected party who took issue with that doorman ejecting said person. He behaved in a way. For that reason, the incident is recorded, as we chose to no longer use the gentleman's services. 4 incidents in the whole of 2019 involved violence. 1 was a group of friends disagreement. 2 was an unfortunate hit at the doorman when people were indeed leaving the premises due to that decision, and 1 was an unproven allegation. Only 1 of the violent incidents above happened during cumulative impact hours. In 2018, only 1 incident led to an arrest. And again, I must highlight that this venue entertained 180,000 people throughout 2019, approximately. When you look into the point made about the food provision being irrelevant after the midnight, I suppose any experienced operator would remember that the Licensing Act has always placed a great deal of weight in the ability for operators to provide food, as this helps mitigate the impact of alcohol consumption. In fact, the need to provide substantial food when retaining alcohol has been common for many, many years, and it's been adopted as a government condition on licensed premises that wished to sell alcohol only a few months ago. Literally to every single licensed premises around the country. We've all seen throughout COVID, a lot of businesses, unless they sold food, they were not able to retail alcohol. This, to me, is all the evidence we need to show that food provision after midnight and at all times is nothing but relevant. There is also an array of businesses in the vicinity that operate a food provision from 9 p.m., trading at its peak from midnight until 4 a.m. Therefore, in my opinion, this comment shows a poor understanding on how the evening and nighttime economy works. There is a concern over security staff levels from the police. This was almost a point, in my opinion, not worth addressing, as, in my opinion, it suggests very little to nothing. The police and council of licensing officers would know that historically I have demonstrated a capability to assess when security is required, and never once in 18 years of managing in the evening and time economy in Swansea, not once that I ever had any in managing any situation due to shortage of security staff. Put simply, the safety and staff of customers, for me, is absolutely paramount to every value underpinning our business, and I take real issue with anyone suggesting any different. The police suggest that rope sections of furniture could be moved and therefore promote high volume vertical drinking. In my opinion, this demonstrates yet again the incredible lack of understanding of what Bamboo has achieved with the recent changes. And in my opinion, some poor thinking from police licensing. The reality is the increase of seating available from previous scheme is superior to the increase of numbers now available. In short, all the extra space Bamboo can entertain will be for seated customers. But also, that the actual space in Bamboo that is available actually corresponds to a capacity higher than the 770. But the reason why we have to keep it to 770, because that's what we're legally able to do. We cannot have anyone else. It doesn't matter whether we have all the furniture in the world or zero furniture whatsoever. The numbers will always be the same. Cannot go above 770, as if we did so, I would be compromising the safety of all our guests and staff. Also worth pointing out that all our venues are regularly visited by police and fire authority, and never once have had an issue with being over capacity in any of our premises. This spans in over 26-year-old career. I could have explained this point with ease and spared the embarrassing points made if indeed there was an intent to engage and communicate right from the very first application. But sadly, this never happened. There is a further point made by the police regarding the marketing of our venues. This, in short, shows that there is really no business understanding. There's no understanding of how a business operates. We need to start looking at this comment and think there isn't a single venue on my street, and quite possibly Swansea, and it wouldn't surprise me, quite possibly throughout the whole of Southwest, that works at capacity. For that reason, it is only natural that every single business person in charge of its business at all times promotes the business as much as they can. It is not because I have now refurbed and improved our offer that all of a sudden I'm going to work harder to promote it. I've been working incredibly hard every single day for the last 26 years to promote every business I've ever been involved with. And so this point of somehow now we will be attracting further people to the street more than before, it's unfortunately a misguided one. There is then also a final paragraph about the current challenges. In short, we can look at the crime stats and we can see they've been steadily decreasing for the evening and nighttime economy for a long time. Sadly, Swansea does not have the metrics and the measurements to understand the footfall in the city and different places for both daytime and nighttime economy. If it did, and if indeed followed the same trend as my businesses who have seen a growth in footfall, we would learn that indeed there's been a consistent and steady decline of crime, especially when you consider the pro rata factor. I then move on to why I hope we should take stock of myself as the operator. And I hope to briefly highlight what's been the track record in our business and previous businesses and the impact we have had in those addresses. I'll attempt to be as succinct as I can, But if we start with our very first venue, Peppermint Swansea, it was a business that had a succession over 5 years of 5 operators who just did a lot of wrong. We had an opportunity to take over that business. We did. 11 and something years later, we are holding strong and now boast of not only being an award-winning business, but also the highest footfall venue in the Swansea's evening and nighttime economy. We continuously invest in that venue every year, and we're very much part, and our management teams are part of local community groups who regularly contribute to the neighbouring community activity, something that previous operators completely failed to do, and create some animosity. Peppermint Cardiff is another great example of how we wish to run our operations. When we took over this site 10 years ago, the previous operator actually had an issue with a machete attack on a customer right by its front door. This was, of course, a significant issue, and it pretty much was used as the foundation on how we chose to set our venues up. Since we took over in 2011, we not only created an award-winning and highly invested space that took the most significant prominence in transforming Mill Lane as a premium go-to place in Cafe Quarter in Cardiff. It's the highest footfall per square footage in the whole of Cardiff, and it's pretty much a virtually trouble-free venue. The ratio of incidents versus footfall of the evening and nighttime economy as a venue is significantly lower than anything else I've ever worked with. The current investment that we've done has demonstrated why investments that we're planning to do in Bamboo can have a huge, significant impact. Even though with all the positive improvements we've done recently, and trading gone up by 42%, footfall has gone up by 26%, the recorded level of incidents pro rata is around the 63%. And we have the evidence to back this up. We purposely are recording this data because I took the initiative to use specialist consultants to propose a policy of improvement of both Mill Lane as well as Wine Street. I've invested approximately £15,000 to commission reports and a way forward on those 2 streets. Cardiff has been done back in 2019 and completed in 2019, and we now have the data that we've been sharing with local authorities, and we hope that goes to show that when you invest in the premises, you get the results. Bamboo Beach Bar was an operation that we took over roughly 9 years ago. It was a significantly underappreciated Grade 2 listed building that required over £500,000 worth of investment just to put it up to scratch. It was a place that was infamous for underage drinking. That when we undertook the refurbishment of that space, there was some significant findings about some of the stuff that was going on in that address that involved issues with hooliganism and racism. Brewstone Uplands was a business that was a derelict operation riddled with all sorts of issues, and another venue that kept on being unsuccessful. We merged 2 buildings to create an award-winning bar, and above all, quite possibly a real community hub that we're very proud of. Brewdog, in particular, is worth mentioning because I believe this site epitomizes how we operate and our beliefs. That particular address used to be operated by the Adelphi pub. The current rent on that space is nothing short but 2.5 times per square foot than anything else we currently occupy. We still decided to take that venue on board, predominantly because it was such a problematic venue. And so not only we put a significant investment and completely turned that space around, but we were the first people to bring about the Brewdog ban into the city, something that focused particularly in attracting a completely different demographic onto Wine Street. We have successfully achieved that. And I suppose if I then focus on the operator itself, myself, beyond the CV, it was throughout this exercise of analyzing the police licensing representation that was probably the first time I really took stock as to what I believe that relentless and tirelessly hard work putting towards Swansea's evening and daytime economy has brought about. And this made me want to put on this statement that with the operator itself, what we have brought to the city was nothing short of a £4.2 million investment into the nighttime economy. There's a worth of community activity to actively improve Swansea's nighttime economy, and in particular Wine Street. I don't believe there is a longer serving stakeholder to Wine Street, whether you find them in politics, local authority, police, or even the business community itself. I've been working that street for a very long time. I understand exactly its dynamic, and I work tirelessly to do everything I can to improve it. I am a regular contributor in numerous stakeholder groups that help shape day and nighttime economies. I have personally won, and there's a typo in my statement which I must apologize for, but 2018s and not 19s of UK's best multi-operator at the EI Group Awards. This is Britain's biggest pub landlord that recognizes all the work I've done. I've already mentioned that I've led and spent in excess of £15,000 to commission specialists to report and recommend why and how we should invest in the pedestrianisation and other improvements of both Wine Street, Swansea, and Mill Lane, Cardiff. This work was not only fully supported by both cities' business improvement districts, but it was also picked up by both local councils, and it was the main base that led to the current ongoing investment of 2.8 million in pedestrianising Wine Street. Cardiff, who's done that, has seen the results from our businesses that I've talked about earlier, a reduction in 63% worth of incidents. It's worth repeating that due to this report, we were able to get Wine Street finally pedestrianised. We were able to finally get the result we've talked about in the city for many years about making Wine Street a cafe quarter that we can all be proud of. This was done because of my work. The work above intended throughout the public improvement realm is pretty much the foundation on how I like to operate. I came to learn that this is apparently epitomized by a study made in the 70s called the broken window theory. In short, the broken window theory is something that tends to address a basic principle, that if you are able to fix everything that is wrong aesthetically and operationally in the space, with a strong set of MO, of modus operandi, of operational processes, you can indeed totally and radically change issues of incidents and trouble. This was epitomized in the 90s in New York City. This is led by the police commissioner at the time and the city's mayor. They saw reduction of crime, I believe, in the region of around 60%. This is all public record. And this is pretty much the foundation of what I'm hoping to achieve with the pedestrianisation of Wine Street. Therefore, it makes complete and utter sense that if I'm going to invest so significantly in the premises on Wine Street, I've commissioned a report for positive change to transform Wine Street to become more attractive to a broader demographic, to families, to turn the space into a food and drink cafe quarter, that I only set that operation to be future-proof. The significant investment comes out of a great deal of hard work, out of a significant deal of borrowing, and I most certainly, as a small independent company, wouldn't be throwing that money away if I didn't believe that this was something that had to yield for the future. Therefore, what we intend to do with the bamboo operation is very much that, to future-proof it, in line with the changes that Wine Street is hoping to bring about this year. I hope, as a final point, that this all demonstrates that there should be absolutely no question to my commitment to the city's evening and time economy, to operate a safe, well-invested, well-staffed, and of a very high standard operation. I hope that one final, possibly most poignant point I can make is that Bamboo should be allowed to operate to his full capacity in line with everyone else in the city, is because he has, at its own, an operator that's given a lot to the city over so many years, an operator that's done more than anyone else from the business community by quite some distance to improve the city's food, drink, and entertainment offer. I believe the licensing committee has the power to grant us this application. This, in my opinion, would be the right consideration based not only after all the points made above, but the trust I believe I deserve after such a long, strong history, track record, and hard work done for the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go, if anyone has any questions for either you or Mr. Parry. Councillor Stewart, no. Councillor Lloyd, would you like to put your question, please?
Well, thank you, Chair. I just briefly, I'd like to know what the staffing numbers are per shift if this goes ahead, is granted, and the distribution of door staff, security staff, over the floors of the building. What would they be, please?
Thank you, Mr. Roach.
Bill, should I answer? Sorry, forgive me. Should I answer?
Mr. Nunes, yes, please, if you would answer that those questions.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Alison. It varies, the staff levels will be adapted to customer levels. I'll probably turn my camera off to make sure that the volume isn't interrupted. The staffing levels will be depending, of course, on the volume of trade. Like I said, unfortunately, we don't ever operate really at capacity, with the exception of a very few hours of a very few key dates throughout the year. But you would expect a typical management structure team would have a general manager, would have a deputy manager, will have 4 to 5 departmental managers. One would take responsibility for the bar, one take responsibility for the food, one would take responsibility for the service, which is waiters and hosts. One would take over security and the other one take over entertainment. Below that structure, you normally would find, in particular, with bar and service, what's called a head waiter and a head bartender. They tend to then control a team of senior and junior bartenders, waiters, and hosts. Within security, we normally have a deputy, and within that, with security staff levels, would again depend on how much of the venue it's operated. Typically, the front door will see never any less than 2 security staff. Internally, on the ground floor, if fully open, we would place 1 security staff on one side of the building and the other one on the other side of the building. This would be approximately, possibly 60 to 70 meters apart at the very maximum. They would be in constant communication with each other. Then there will now be 2 access points instead of 1, and this is part of the recent changes to relieve the pressure placed on one staircase and potential pinch points. We would then be placing at the top of those staircases a security staff that then controls from the first floor those 2 key points, and then on the first floor you would have those 2 plus an additional third who quite likely, from experience, if busy and fully open, would roam around the room, judging the mood and looking to spot any issues or incidents that may arise. And the idea is to prevent before we have to intervene, which is how we proactively handle our security. Subsequently, then, there will be a second roof terrace that, if open, and sadly in Wales with our weather, we're not that lucky to open as much as we would like, but when we are allowed to open it, we'll be looking for an additional 1 member of security staff. And then, in addition, when trading at full capacity, we will possibly be having a person roaming throughout all floors, someone who can move to replace anyone who sets to move from that position due to any particular issue with availability, whether it be a toilet break, whether it be to walk or escort someone else. We operate with a code that makes our security staff react accordingly That could be a simple green man all the way to a red man, suggesting that whether a customer fell asleep, whether a customer decided to take their shoes off and there may be glass, whether there'll be any other typical issue with a customer behavior that we want to prevent and ask him to invite, all the way to there's an altercation that requires security staff to get involved. And normally you have the two closest or three closest to the business, to the incident, that through a generation of codes would then move and react accordingly, depending on the procedure required. Additional staff to that, we have a whole team of support staff at head office. I sit, as I mentioned earlier, as the chief exec for the business. We have heads of department for marketing, sales, human resources, operations. We currently, sadly, throughout COVID, we found ourselves having to restructure and make some redundancies. This forces us to work with some additional third-party agencies as well to support our business, and we're rebuilding the team as we speak, hopefully in line with being able to trade like we used to pre-COVID. There is also a team of support staff. We call them barbacks, who are responsible for maintaining the support to all the food and drink. There'll be some food runners, and there would also be some people responsible for cleaning of the floor, spillages, breakages, etc.
Thank you for that answer, but can you just tell us on the floors how many people you will have security-wise on each floor, please? So to the ground floor, the first floor, second floor, so that we've just got figures to work on.
That was my question, Chair.
Ground floor.
I know you had a very comprehensive answer, but I understood what you were getting at.
Sorry, focusing solely on security, correct?
Yes, please.
Okay, there will be up to 4 security on the ground floor.
4 security on the ground floor.
Yeah, and you'll potentially be up to 3 security on the second floor.
On the second floor, right?
And there will be up to a minimum of up to 2-3 security on the second floor. Yes, up to, I would say, depending on the volume of people, sunny day, full, potentially up to 3 security on the top floor. Yes.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions, please?
For me, thanks.
Councillor Lloyd?
No, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gallagher, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes, for the answer. I've got a number of questions. I'd like to pick up on the number of security staff, if I can, at the moment. I believe my figures are correct, that there would be 9 if you were operating at full capacity.
Possibly.
Now, you're not going to obviously operate in full capacity at all times. And could you confirm if it is, shall I say, a non-full capacity day, how many door staff you would have on who would control, obviously, entry, exit, and access to the floors?
I see. So due to the multi-facet aspect of the business, forgive me, Councillor Gallagher, the line broke slightly, so I hope I didn't miss anything you said. When you made mention of the numbers, my estimation is that we could have up to 10 security staff at peak, splitting 4-3-3. With regards to levels, I mean, we could have a typical, say, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday night, where in the evening we may not see more than 20-30 guests. On that day, we'll be operating between 1 and 2 security staff. Worth noting, we operate the security company ourselves. It's one of our businesses, and we also provide security to 2 other venues on the street. So when you have typically such a low level of footfall, we would operate with 1 security staff and then have the support, because we'll all be connected to the radio, as everyone would be within 20-30 meter distance in case there is a need for any support. That would be the extreme low level of staff and customers. A typical Wednesday, for example, we can see a quiet Wednesday, see maybe 250, 300 guests. We would possibly post still 2 on the front door and a minimum of 1 upstairs. Possibly if the front door is very quiet, 1 can operate by itself, and then 2 may monitor the upstairs, because we may choose to only operate the first floor and close the ground floor. If we're looking into a busy Wednesday, we could ultimately, if you're thinking fresh as fair, you could reach capacity. That would be a full team, up to 10 door staff. If you are looking at Fridays and Saturdays, Friday, sadly, it's never a day that we ever reach capacity, with perhaps maybe the exception of Black Friday. And therefore, again, especially being Black Friday, we tend to, throughout December, throughout Beaujolais Day, and the occasional bank holiday, although bank holidays in Swansea are nowhere near where they used to be. But, you know, they're probably the only dates we may be close to capacity on a Friday. And then you're probably looking at, I would say, an average Friday, 400, 500 guests at peak. And that would normally work at a ratio of, you know, 1 per 100 would be normally how we operate. As a general sort of rule of thumb, we'll probably be going for, you know, 2 security staff for the first couple of hundred, and then 1 per 100 would be the standard sort of numbers we would apply on the capacity of the premises. But even though there's only 770, so in theory we would need more than 7. Full capacity 7, in my opinion. You know, according to regs, it's okay, but again, we always tend to have an extra 1 or 2 compared to expectations, because that's just how we operate. And safety paramount, multi-dimension, multifaceted venue will require that. Hope
Thank you.
That made some sense.
That's a comprehensive answer. Thank you very much. I'm looking at another question now in relation to staffing levels. And it doesn't tell me how many actual full-time staff that you have who would be your sort of representatives in relation to the license holders or the premises. Could you advise on how that would work?
Sorry, forgive me, Councillor Gallagher. You're referring to how many full-time staff are we looking to employ?
Would you, yes, so would you have on? So they would be the constant in operation of the premises?
Sure. All our management teams would be full-time staff. Our head bartenders would be full-time staff. A significant proportion of our senior bartenders and waiters and hosts will be full-time staff. There'll be some positions which will be full-time, because they handle things like stock management, cleaning duties, the usual weekly reset activity we have to undertake to manage the business pre-opening. All the support staff are full-time as well, and I believe a couple of the security staff will have no other job than with ourselves. Cleaners, a similar position. So it's forgive me if I'm not being specific, but everything is relatable. If for example if I'm forced to under trade with a 620 capacity, this will naturally have an impact on trading operations, and therefore less people can be given full-time hours. Everything is really relatable. You know, the part of the hard work is not just a philanthropic need, but there's this genuine belief that Swansea has 250,000 people that live within its core, 490 in the outskirts, 750,000 in the SA postcode. I believe that demographic should be our principal folk that should visit the city centre. Sadly, it's not, because of its reputation. All the work I'm doing is to change that. If I'm successful, the demographic will broaden, will expand, and with that, will give me the opportunity to trade further. And sadly, COVID has made a lot of damage, and there's too much uncertainty to be able to be specific pre everything going back to normal. And then, of course, there's also political issues with regards to, what the policies may be set for the future, for the rest of the year, that will naturally impact on, the local authorities know too well how difficult it is to manage throughout the current period with the current regs, 2 meter distance restrictions and so on. So it's unfortunately not as clear to give me the ability to give you a straight answer. Forgive, I feel like I'm waffling and being
No,
a
I
little
think
bit vague.
you've
I
answered.
wish I could be specific.
No, you've answered my thoughts. You did mention a question in relation to seated drinking as against standing drinking, which obviously accept, but seated drinking doesn't prevent excess alcohol consumption. I wonder if you sort of, just explain to me how you intend to manage that.
So when you have a seated experience, you will naturally have a waiter or a host look after yourself. And that exchange tends to be more comprehensive, more thorough, of a higher quality. With that, we premiumize the overall service. But with that, give us the experience with it to assess the customer a little bit better at the bar. I think all the licensing authorities understand that despite much effort from all the bartenders that are working up and down the country serving alcohol, when you are busy, there's only so much exchange you can have with a customer to 100% guarantee that that person is indeed okay. When they sat down, it's much easier to assess, I suppose. And I think when you sat down, I suppose if you probably remember when back in the day, there's a significant difference of having to hold your drink and having that weight on your hand, which you more often will bring to your mouth and dispatch much quicker. When you sit down, you put your drink down, you socialize, your hands can maneuver, you can do the whole, gesticulation and whatnot, and therefore you're probably not just that with a constant reminder weighing on your hand. And that used to be the reason why I believe pre-2003 Licensing Act, there was a lot of license conditions from memory at the time, which revolved around the provision of seating for that same reason.
Mr. Nunes, you mentioned in the first part of your response about weighted or weighted at seat end. Are you telling me that all those seated are going to have a waiter service?
If the people wish to do so, yes. We on a similar venue operation, our service style will be offering host or table service. Normally, you would have a team of up to, say, I pick out our Cardiff example. Our Cardiff venue can have, for example, up to 3-4 hosts, which is our responsibility is to take them to the table and back. Then at the table, they will normally be entertained or looked after by a waiter. So our Cardiff venue has 200 capacity ground floor inside, 200 first floor. Those 2 internal floors will normally have 1 to 2 waiters each. Sometimes customers wouldn't want table service because sometimes in an evening in a time economy, people want to move around and go to the bar and order, but we always make that as an option because it gives us the opportunity to upsell better quality products. Why have a run-of-the-mill house product when you can potentially enjoy a premium and have something that is pretty? And especially at this day and age, I don't use much of it, but I suppose all the rage is Instagram and taking pretty photos. So that you have a potential reach just simply by the actual clientele themselves photographing and videoing their own experience. That is in itself the biggest weapon that any type of food drink will need to promote its activity to the bigger audience, really, to the friends of the friends, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I'm not an Instagram fan, but I've no doubt a lot of youngsters are.
Nor am I.
Just one final point. We mentioned, obviously, crime during the pandemic has decreased somewhat rapidly, and that is probably because of most people being stuck behind and not allowed to go in places. However, and if you look at the recent national statistics, both violence and drug crime has increased during that period. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that this
Indeed.
will cause a problem in Wine Street, but I think we would all like to see a maintenance of decrease, and in that respect, and you're asking for an extra 150 patrons to the cumulative impact. Can you just explain to me in brief terms why the 150 is not going to be affecting the cumulative impact? And I don't need to go into the premises closed. I'd just like your views from your premises, how you're going to maintain that.
Absolutely, Councillor Gallagher. I suppose this really touches the point as to why, with my opening statement, I believe the industry is indeed much needed to be operating. And if I had the power to do things different, I probably would have introduced the safety measures to manage COVID, but I wouldn't have closed those venues. I would have attempted to figure out safe ways to still enable people to go out and enjoy themselves, food, drink, and entertainment in our sector. Mainly because people want to go out and do what they do. The difference is, if they are in licensed premises, they will have an army of bartenders, waiters, managers, security staff, and other experts who are there keeping the control measures in place and giving people the opportunity to enjoy themselves. If they are not there, they will go elsewhere, but they will do so uncontrollably, and therefore creating the issues that we sadly bore witness of. I believe the statistics are indeed quite negative for crime and antisocial behaviour, even though our sector is closed. And I suppose that's the best evidence anyone can hope to show that our industry it has a very positive impact. I know we operate late. I know we consume hours from police and licensing and health-related authorities. I understand all that, but that would only get worse if we didn't exist, as the recent lockdown came to show us. What we can do is continue to operate in the most effective manner. The good guys, the good operators should be supported. The bad guys, the bad operators should have the book thrown at them. The relevant conditions and the relevant legislative infrastructure that already exists, that really, if enforced appropriately, will ultimately make individuals have to either clean up their act or simply just leave and allow someone else to do it. That's why I believe the 150 indeed is, from a bigger context, I suppose we are, in my opinion, essential, and therefore our existence only helps curtail trouble and incidents and prevents things from escalating to the point where, sadly, we've even had to bear witness to police officers and other local authority folk being assaulted, even in our own city. SA1, I believe, last weekend, again, had to bear some issues as well, which was quite disappointing.
Thank you. I have no further questions, if that helps you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have got some questions for you. Can you tell me, please, with regard to the 3 floors, how many seats can actually be removed easily from each of the floors? Because you've got in the diagrams you sent to us, you've got the ones clearly marked that are secured. And I'm just wondering how many of them are going to come out if there's a big surge on it and you need to remove them for some reason.
I believe in the ground floor, nothing will be physically possible to remove because it's all bespokely made to fit the space that is available. On the first floor, I would possibly say there is on the dance floor areas, we have some fitting sort of oil drum, because obviously the concept is a beach, it's beach inspired. So we have that sort of Caribbean beach shack sort of look. And so we have some oil drums, which can be ultimately unscrewed off the floor if they must. if you really wanted to. And then if you look into the plans for the external areas, so if you're looking at the plan on your left-hand side, there's a cluster of roped section area seating, which we would have, well, we'd have nowhere to put it for starters, but we could ultimately lift that and then screw it again and potentially remove it. But again, it would just leave a silly void in the middle and it just wouldn't work. Plus, we wouldn't have where to put it. In addition to that, you could possibly say there's an area that says right on the far end, there's a fixed seating, which is by a staircase and by a fire exit. So maybe there's some loose stools that could be removed. And then if you're looking into the second...
Explain why I asked this question, because you say on the second floor, all the seating on the second floor you've got here is fixed, and that's great, okay? But on the, that was on the second floor. On the first floor, where the dance floor is, okay, you've got 25 covers, but it doesn't say that they are fixed, and that's the reason for the question.
Oh, well, my apologies. So just focusing strictly on the first floor dance floor, correct?
Yes.
Right. They are the oil drums I was referring to, ma'am, which have got some small L brackets which are then screwed onto the floor. I suppose due to the nature of the seat, the stools are loose because they should fit comfortably the people that work around it, if you wish. So I suppose that's the best explanation I can give. So
are they actually bolted to the floor or not? And you know, all I need to know is, are they removable?
The tables are screwed to the floor. The seats, due to the nature of the seating, are loose.
So my question is, those 25 covers, could they be cleared away for more dancing to take part, or if you've got a big event on?
I suppose it could possibly. The seats only. We wouldn't want to be unscrewing furniture. If we've, you know, like I mentioned earlier, the actual floor space available throughout the venue, it's somewhat approximately of about around 850. So the venue isn't under pressure to remove furniture to fit more people. There's plenty of space, and so that dance floor, it's quite significant. So I'm sorry. Forgive me if I'm not being clear enough, ma'am. But you know, we're not pressured by space, so there should be no reason why we should really have to bother removing the seats. But of course, we would do the occasional event where we might decide to dress the place up and enable some ability to move things around to suit that space, to dress things up, to add decoration, to do all sorts of event production.
Okay, thank you. The question of waitress service was broached, and you said if they wanted. Now, this is something that clearly as an authority we're encouraging, and I'm just wondering what your feelings are on that.
Table service existing, ma'am, did you say?
Yes, there is, yes.
Oh, like I said, it's a perfect opportunity to premiumize the experience and sell more. As you can imagine, as a business, we would want to sell better and more to those who are prepared to pay better. The the ability to make someone wait to go to the bar, if busy, have to be too deep, waiting to be served, having to exponentially wait those minutes, is not only something that can be quite customer frustrating, but I know that a lot of a strong demographic who just is not attracted to it. Therefore, it would only make sense for us to have folks who are facilitating that guest experience. We already provide those at that Bamboo address as is. This will just enable us to have more and do better. But I wholeheartedly support it, and it's something that is crucial to operation.
Okay. So how much? So okay. So I'm just concerned about how many people are going to be hanging around this bar, because clearly we could possibly be looking at a high volume stand-up drinking establishment, and that's what neither of us want to. So I'm just wondering what we can do to ensure that that doesn't come about, you know, that we don't end up, this is why I mentioned the waitress service, because that would eliminate that happening now.
Of course. Yeah, so we'll be beyond waitresses. We will be cover this taught us that providing technology to take some of the pressure off the bar could also enable people to order remotely. Again, our job is to try and facilitate food and drink provision as simple and as easy as we can physically make it. Even for those who don't want table service for whatever reason, they still have the ability to order for that table. All the tables will be numbered, and so pretty much it's, well, I think every single business in the industry is now doing is as an app solution to offset some of those pressures, really. But also what these changes have also made, ma'am, is that just on that first floor, for example, we've split the one bar we had, which was probably of about this size, and we've split it on as two bars now, exactly to take a lot of that pressure off.
Good. Okay. That's good, thank you. Can I ask you, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday are probably likely to be your busiest days from the statistics we've had through from the police. Will you be putting extra staff on those days? Can you know, could you assure us of that? Because you obviously you don't want to be in a position where you get inundated because you're going to be a new bar opening up. Everybody's going to want to come there. And I'm just wondering how that's going to work out.
Absolutely, ma'am. I could probably attempt to give you a real life example of one of the challenges we have. I've signed up to a premises in the centre of Penarth, which is costing me a significant sum of money for the last 5 years. The only reason why I haven't developed the premises there is for one reason only. The premises that we wish to operate is another Brewstone site. Currently, our operation has run last year at a 42% staff payroll cost. Show that I don't compromise on staffing levels whatsoever, even though that's disabled me from carry on with a particular development. A restaurant normally would operate with a 29% payroll. A bar would probably operate with a 22 to 25, a nightclub about 18. You know, our venue operates easy in excess of 22, 25 in that address and other venues. And I suppose what I'm trying to really say is that the idea of skimping on staff, shall we say, it's just never been a way that I've ever operated any of my businesses whatsoever. If I expect an increased level of business, we'll forever staff accordingly.
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to open it up now so that we're going, it's open for anybody to ask anybody else questions, but can you come through the chair, please?
Chair, yeah. Sergeant Hancock mentioned in the beginning about an issue in relation to smoking and urinating outside. Now, I'm looking at the ground floor licensing plan, and I can see obviously that there are toilet facilities there. What I can't see is where the smoking area is, and perhaps Mr. Nunes, you can explain where the smoking areas are on the 3 floors, because the extent of the licensed premises is indicated in red. So obviously you don't want to be drinking outside of your licensed premises.
Sure. So I believe in January 2019 even, Officer Hancock and Licensing Officer Bethan Walker visited the site and had a licensing review with the manager. At the time, the toilets were indeed highlighted as a concern. As you can see, the scheme introduced a brand new set of toilets. This was quite the challenge because it required us to do some significant structural alterations. We almost have to find space that didn't exist, so to speak. And that resolved that issue. And the removal, I believe the incident refers to some customer who left the premises because they were queuing to get to the first floor, and then they decided to go outside and go in an alleyway and relieve themselves. This is, of course, quite upsetting to hear. We had a significant cost and challenge. We fixed that. And as for smoking, part of the pedestrianisation on the Wine Street is going to enable the use of the outside pavement. I suppose we will facilitate an element of that, but also Bamboo is lucky enough to boast of the space on first and second floors, external space that people can use should they see fit. We haven't made a decision whether we will just freely allow smoking. I mean, I suppose outdoors we may not have an issue with people smoking, but I'm not too sure whether we're not convinced yet that we're going to promote the outside front door to be a smoking area. The two main reasons is that, putting a smoking area at your front door, for me, I think represents a negative business card. My wife is a particular person that if she has to walk somewhere through a cloud of smoke, it really bothers her. Also, with the provision of food, having people smoking next to you is still quite displeasing, even outdoors. So we may encourage people to probably utilize first and second floor areas to smoke as opposed to front door. But this is an operational decision that we are yet to make.
Thank you.
Mr. Hancock, would you like to say something, please?
Yes, if I could ask a question in relation to the layout inside the premises and certainly the stairwells. Can you confirm whether it's going to be a one-way up, one-way down, or will there be crossover on each of the stairwells between levels, please?
We will be unlikely to producing one way in, one way out, mainly because what tends to happen is if you're operating on a busy day and you're trying to tell people that they're going to have to go upstairs to the table closest to the entrance to the staircase, and you have to ask them to go to the other side of the building to go up and to come down, that can sometimes lead to unnecessary friction. So as you probably remember, we had that challenge of that grade 2, because it's a grade 2 listed building. We have a fairly steep staircase that is the main staircase that leads to the first floor. Introducing the second staircase is there to try and remove the pressure. And so to create just a one-way, I believe, could unnecessarily add confusion and a potential friction point with customers. So obviously pre-COVID, whilst COVID exists, we may adopt a temporary solution of one way, but most certainly once social distance and hopefully all the nonsense goes away, we can just return to normal and allow a certain element of free flow.
Good. Chair, can I just follow up on that with a quick question, please?
Yes, please. Yes,
so just to confirm, you will have 2 stairwells going from the ground level up to the first floor for up and down. Can you just confirm then from the next levels up how many stairwells you've got which will need to be controlled?
So worth noting that the stairwells will only open if there's a need for volume of customers. So, for example, if the ground floor doesn't operate at all, if the ground floor doesn't operate the rear section, which can be sectioned off, then naturally we wouldn't want any movement at the time. But we do have an additional 2 staircases leading to the second floor, from one internal and 2 external staircases that lead to the second floor, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have the plans available, but with the introduction of a mezzanine, we've enabled an additional staircase, both internally as well as external. This has made a significant improvement to the whole mobility and movement of staff and customers.
Thank you. Any more questions, please? Can I just ask you, how are you going to control the flow of traffic for people going from one level to the other, possibly say downstairs, and then they think, okay, my friend's upstairs, I want to go up there. How will you be able to control how many people are where, please?
Yes, we are currently looking, my colleague Mike Griffiths deals with all elements of health, safety, security and licensing. The last time I reviewed this with him, he was looking into a electronic solution that can give the people on the front door an understanding of the volume on each floor. If that system ever failed, we would always default into a manual solution with security staff or other hosts that could then be placed to ensure that no floor can ever go over capacity. It's important to note that even though the venue may have 770 people as an overall total capacity, we must never allow any of the floors to go above its own capacity because of the fire exit situation. So we know that there's 360 only on the ground floor. If the 770 decided to, for example, go upstairs first and second, that could never happen. So we will have ultimately, hopefully, a electronic solution, but failing that, we have a secondary system which will be just controlled by humans and obviously radio communication.
My reason for the question was because, of course, you've got more than one stairwell, so people can go up one way, come down another, and would the person tracking them be able to see that? That's the reason for the question. I'm sure you're keen on keeping people to the floor they designated to.
Forgive me, ma'am. I'm not sure if it's my end, but I missed the first point you made. Forgive me. Could you say that again, please?
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm asking is because people could go into one floor, possibly say the middle floor, on one stairwell, and then move up to the third floor or go down on another stairwell, and how, in fairness to your operators, how would they be aware?
Indeed. So this is why the digital platform is, of course, the most desired. We would be looking to apply currently, I believe, the best technology. From, again, the last review I've had my business partner, I would have to triple check if we found a better solution, but it will be some sort of beam breaker system, which enables in all staircases know where the movement up and down is gone from that staircase. That has some options on those systems, and we are very much looking to explore on the most effective one.
Okay,
but we will have something in place without a doubt.
Okay. Okay. And the other question I had was for the licensing officer. Mr. Parry said that no other premises in Wine Street are restricted by numbers. Can you clarify that for me, please?
I can confirm that the only premises license in the Wine Street area is the current license for Bamboo that has a capacity conditioned on the license.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so are there any more questions that anybody would like to ask, please? If not, we're going to leave the last word with probably Mr. Parry, and then we'll go into recess.
Yes, Mum, thank you very much indeed. What I'm not going to try to do is to repeat everything that you've heard already, and because you're seized of the application. You've heard at length from the relevant parties. I respectfully remind you that special policy or no, your function and your duty is to deal with this application on its merits. In dealing with the application on its merits, in my submission, you properly take into account the closure of premises since the special policy was introduced and since indeed it was last reviewed in 2018. I think we saw a figure in excess of 10,000 in the evidence that was given to you by Mr. Nunes. In my respectful submission, dealing with the application on its merits, that's a matter you properly take into account. And you set that against a consideration of the increase in capacity for these premises. The fact of the matter is that the numbers in Wine Street are dramatically reduced since the introduction of the policy and since its review in 2018. In my submission, you also properly take into account the crime figures for these premises. Extremely low. I think they'd have to be at just about nil to be lower than they are. In my submission, you also take into account what you've heard from Mr. Nunes in relation to the application and the intention to broaden the appeal of these premises through the introduction of improved quality, seating, and very importantly, the provision of food throughout all of the trading floors, throughout all of the trading hours. It's my case that on its merits you grant this application. This is a sector that is looking for help right now. It's a sector that needs all of the support that it can get. More importantly, this is an application which, in my respectful submission, deserves your support. Those are my final submissions, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Parry. It's now 20 past 12. Shall we say we'll be back at 10 to 1? Would that be okay for the committee, please?
I mean,
back online at 10 to 1? Okay, then thank you. I'll see you at 10 to 1. Thank you, everyone. It's the first time I've seen them probably look awkward. I didn't know it was
The remaining people are colleagues of mine who are sitting in, so there's no. I appreciate the concern, Councillor Gallagher, that there were people who hadn't left the meeting.
Who's still on?
My colleague.
Sorry, Alex. I'll just stop the recording at this point, okay? Because we always stop recording.
That's not a problem. Not a problem. I fully understand.
The chair has just asked who Nick Pepper is. He's one of them.
That's what I'm saying. He's one of my. Yeah. He's one of my colleagues who will be assisting us in licensing going forward. So he wanted to see how these things work.